This is a Clouds weather alert.
Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center on this late Thursday, early Friday. As we see the current picture right now, it's pretty warm here, 2 o'clock or so in the morning. That summertime pattern, a little bit hotter than normal maybe, but that's not the biggest story. The biggest story is going to be towards Sunday and Monday. A much more significant headline as we're expecting some of the hotter temperatures we've seen in recent memory around here. So we just need to be thinking about that. I know it's already been hot and you've already needed to practice your heat safety tips, but this could be taking it up another notch or two towards Sunday and Monday. Heat index values that we've rarely seen around here over the years, and even the temperatures, same type of deal. I mean, we're talking about triple digits on the axial thermometer with the humidity being a factor. So we really have to look at that here, and we'll have more on that in the full forecast in a moment. You do see a general thunderstorm outlook for that Friday across our area. And you see actually some storms toward Wakulla County right now for those watching live. There's a couple special weather advisories, special weather statements in that area toward the Gulf Coast. Let me go ahead. There's actually 3 of them now as we're looking at this. So let me go ahead and punch this on up. We do have some wind enhancement there toward Wakulla and Franklin counties. That's what we're looking at here at about 2 and 9 in the morning. If these get a little bit stronger, could have a warning or two issued. I know there has been a report there of a 55-mile-an-hour gust around Alligator Point at 145, just under severe limits. So, and we had a couple warnings on that late Thursday and toward the evening toward parts of Levy County and areas there in toward Marion. But this is something here that's pretty, late. We have that, heat though still around, and got some different triggers for these. So a little bit of wind enhancement right now, north, south choppy. We're watching that as that moves off toward the north and west there at about maybe 25 miles an hour or so, give or take. So just gonna kind of watch the situation very carefully here. You have more of that with this brighter green trying to fill up there, moving closer toward Carabel and Lanark Village there. So that's kind of the storyline right now. We just have to kind of monitor the situation, obviously, as we're looking toward that area to see if any of these get a severe thunderstorm warning. We'll keep you advised on that, of course, posting the warning information, if that does come into play with a severe thunderstorm warning. If it looks a little more enhanced, might stick with it a little longer in its update, or obviously the tornado warning, I will be on immediately with all that. There's some very weak rotation. I don't see a lot. I mean, these do have a little bit of a small cell structure here. I don't want to say supercellular, really. I mean, I guess in a way, but it's not looking that overwhelming here by any stretch at this point in time. So we don't need to spend too much time on it, especially for those watching later on. You guys want to know about the heat, and that's why we're on alert mode to heat here, not because of the storms we're looking at now, not because of maybe something later on in the tropics that we'll kind of touch on, but I'm, don't want to get into it. There's some model guidance on something in a couple weeks, but there's not enough confidence in, forecast on that. I mean, last year we thought a week, out that we could have a hurricane hitting Florida later in the year after Milton, and that did not happen. So I don't want to be talking about stuff here past a week, with the model runs here. They're hitting on stuff and then kind of fading with it. Maybe, once we start to get more confidence on something in the tropics, if that were to occur, for early August, we'll let you know. It's something though coming up, there areas, in the eastern Atlantic that we be paying attention to. But temperatures are going to be the big story, that thermometer, and then, not just the temperatures, but then what that heat index looks like. I mean, you see some of these right now toward even the 96 mark there in toward Glenn County, Georgia. That's, excessive here for 2 in the morning. For sure, as we're looking at things, the heat and humidity coming together, that's a really important factor, because that's how it feels to everybody out there. Now, closer to the water, you're going to have more of that, humidity there in the storyline. And as we look ahead here in toward that timeline, we're going to really have to watch out for Sunday and Monday, because we're talking about, the numbers we're seeing right now, of course, is what we expect in the middle of the night, but the peak heating of the afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, give or take a little while there, we could be seeing those high temperatures reach, the triple digits in many locations, some that have not gotten to that much over the years, even across the area, in recent memory at least. we could see a bunch of these centers get to 100 Sunday, especially on Monday here, as you see in the full forecast. And the thing about that is we saw that in 2019. It was a dry heat, like May, late May, early June. I believe it was 2019 we had that, but it was not a humid heat. We're in the peak of summer here, folks, and we're going to have the humidity this time around with this heat wave that could be very dangerous if you're not prepared for it. I mean, if you're inside the air conditioning, you might not really realize what's going on, assuming the air conditioning, continues to work, because, some of the AC systems are probably, fade out on folks here, as it'll just be a little too much for the system, as it's already maybe on the edge of going out, and then the extra work could push it, off. And then you could also have a few folks here or there in an isolated manner because there's so much stress on the electrical systems here. A few folks here or there could lose power for a short period of time because, at peak in the day, it could be an unusual excess on the system there on some of the electrical grid. So just make sure, you're prepared with, those little maybe fans here that you can use, in your house for a short period of time. Maybe those small ones. I know they don't do a lot of good, but also just maybe even have one where you could, for a short period, maybe even, just kind of have it on hand here, depending on what type of backup power you have. Not just maybe a battery one, but even depending on the backup, which you got to be careful with the generator safety, of course, with carbon monoxide, but have a way to stay cool with the actual, fan that you can plug in maybe, and just have plenty of water on hand, all the way around. Elderly, young folks, and those with medical conditions, especially susceptible to the heat. So make sure you're really limiting time out there in the heat. As we're looking ahead, you always got to check that back seat of your car, because it's going to be even a quicker process here, for that back seat to warm up very rapidly with the heat that we're looking at. These high temperatures that we rarely see Sunday and Monday. I mean, it's going to still be a problem, Saturday and Tuesday here. Still going to have unseasonably warm readings, but Sunday and Monday could be, up there with some of the higher numbers we've seen, in recent memory, as we're looking. And, for a few folks, depending on where you're at here, could even be living memory. That's what we're talking about here in terms, especially the heat index, because it's not going to be just 100, 101. That's still bad enough. We had that back 2019 there, late May, I believe it was, if I remember my years and timing right. But it was a drier heat than normal. This is going to be a moist heat, and it's going to be 100 anyway. So we're really getting concerned here, and we're in alert mode. I mean, that it's already hot, already can be dangerous, but it's going to be an extra notch or two here. Now, real quick, we'll look at the tropics and say that toward areas of the Gulf, as that kind of goes west, we're going to have high pressure here building, and that's going to be fueling our heat wave here, as we have a little bit drier weather, but still some moisture around, so the heat index will still be high. You see a 10% chance of development with that system moving out toward the west, and they'll be having some increased moisture, in some of those areas for sure, as we're looking even further over. But again, we'll be watching that. Gotta watch out for those flash flooding risk out there, as we've seen toward Texas and the like, early July. But the tragedy there in the Hill Country region. But just during hurricane season, it's always good to have your hurricane kit up to date. There's no immediate threat. The next name is Dexter here, and we will be paying attention toward, East Atlantic. There's been some hints of something, but just always important to stay prepared. There's, not anything I can really get into beyond that, because we're 2 weeks out from maybe something like that. If it were to ever come close to the U.S., which it very well may not even develop or come close, but if it did, we're about 2 weeks away from that. So, it's just too early to get into details. Last year we had a system, it looked like, both models that we really use that are among the most reliable, the European and the American model, were both on board with a hurricane in Florida after Milton. Now we had Milton, which was terrible, but they were both in another hurricane only about a week later, from the point of when we had the area, kind of still in the model. And it's a little bit after Milton, not just a week, but my point is that did not happen. Nothing, really. It became, I believe, a weak tropical storm Sally, or not Sally. There's been so many names here. As for Sarah, it became a weak tropical storm Sarah last year, and it did not end up becoming a big storyline at all. It could have been a much bigger deal, and it wasn't even a tropical system when it hit the state. So, kind of in the overall meteorological pattern. So we don't want to be, hyping things up here, but it's always good to have your hurricane kit up to date. But the reason we're in alert mode is not because of the tropics. Of course, August, October, is when the threat's bigger there. But we're talking about the heat. We need rain with, some of these, type of hot days, because then you get quite a bit that'll cool things off. But I mean, the heat will fire up the storms as well, and the like here as you're looking at things, as you're tracking things. You see around an inch of rain or so around Stark, Gainesville, on average, next 7 days. There'll be, periods later on in the period with that. Tallahassee area to the west a little bit more, but, it's going to be a situation here. And you see South Florida watching some precip as well. Cloudweather.com/weather gives you an interactive look at things. But again, it's about the heat coming up here. I know we'll have some storms some of these days, and when you get them, you'll be better off, cooling off. But then you have the lightning threats and the like here. But you also have the, moisture around here that gets some of these storms sometimes, and that's because of the humidity, the moisture. And the moisture, with the overall pattern and the heat's a problem now. Not for flooding, really. I mean, we've had some flash flood warnings here lately, but, I have this in here because of what happened in Texas. We still want to reiterate weather radios are so important. Flash flood warning indicates a rapidly worsening flooding potential, but drought monitor is kind of important here with the heat. At least we're not seeing anything above abnormally dry now in our area. We did have that flash flooding in Marion County on Tuesday. There's warnings coming on out. And, if we would have started having more of the drought here on this with the heat coming up, it'd be a bigger issue. We still could have some issues with wildfire if you get a lightning strike especially, and you have the heat in play. And there's still, that heat, like it is, there's some humidity to it, but, that could, with the hot conditions, be an issue here at peak heating. So just be very careful, I mean, you really probably don't want to be starting a fire anyway. Some areas are never allowed to do them, like in Duval County. But, there's certain rules on that, outdoor burns, but you can't do them in Duval County. That's the rule there. But I don't think anybody would want to be doing a burn at 100 degrees anyway, because, if that got out of hand, that'd be really, hard for the firefighters to fight. But not just that. I mean, that's dangerous for you. I mean, if you add heat to things, it's really about just staying cool, staying inside as much as you can Sunday and Monday here. Practicing heat safety tips. You're drinking plenty of water and the like. So important here Sunday and Monday especially, but don't overlook the other days in the period as well. I mean, we just got to be really careful now. We're getting some, updates on the storm action here late in the night out toward the Big Bend. So let me see that real quick. You can see out toward parts of Wakulla and Franklin counties. There's some lightning there north of Soft Choppy. And you have some action on Carabel coming on in. Nothing overwhelming there right now, which is good. That's good to see. But let's go ahead and go to the Jacksonville radar. Don't see anything around Stark right now where we're at. And again, it's mainly about the Big Bend, some action there along the coast. We're looking at things as we're tracking things. We're always watching for our 62 counties, always on for any tornado warning storms and the like here. Severe thunderstorm warning updates and flash flood warning updates, either coming on the air or posting about them, depending on what looks necessary. Of course, with the heat coming up, we're in alert mode. We have to cut in a little Sunday and Monday. It would be where we would, potentially have to. I know with the heat, it's kind of, it's temperatures, so sometimes it may not be really even enough to cut in, even if it's really actually dangerous. But with this type of heat, it may be enough for me to actually come on the air just to talk about that a little bit Sunday and or Monday, depending on what we're seeing across the area. So just be on the lookout for any special covers that may be required here Sunday and or Monday. We could get an extreme heat warning, which I know they've changed the nomenclature on that. It used to be the excessive heat warning nomenclature. Now we could get our first ever, I believe it would be with the new nomenclature, extreme heat warnings, because they have extreme cold warnings and the like. The Weather Service now could be our first ever extreme heat warning here with that new nomenclature coming up. So be prepared for that. It could be an extreme heat warning for some, or maybe pretty much everybody in the whole area here as we look ahead Sunday and Monday. There could be some areas that get it later on if they meet the high enough criteria. But Sunday, Monday seems to be the focus for very significant heat danger here. This may be dangerous enough heat. If you're like, Sunday would be the day where most folks versus Monday, if there's like a big outdoor events going on, you may really need to be taking, the heat into consideration here. They're maybe moving things to early morning, late at night. I mean, you have to watch out for mosquitoes sometimes in some of these situations here, but, doing that, just canceling, postponing the event altogether, or making sure you have plenty of water available, because this is the type of heat that can be deadly here even quicker than normal. And for folks that are not quite as susceptible to the danger as normal, that's how we got to really be paying attention here. This heat can be deadlier quicker than normal for folks, as we're talking about triple digits here, folks. You need to be very careful. This could be a situation where you have the highest local heat index values in years possible. I mean, honestly, we, maybe with the heat indexes especially, we may be kind of looking, closer to some of the higher numbers we've ever seen here. And since that's been recorded in history, that hadn't been recorded as long. Of course, George Wonderland kind of come up with that concept there a few decades ago, the late legendary Jacksonville meteorologist there, that was so beloved and still is even after his passing here. We're just looking here at the situation where these could be some of the higher heat index values, because you see 100, 101 on Sunday and Monday here. But the thing about that is you're going to have to factor the humidity in. And this is not going to be a dry heat. Sometimes you see this out, west, and it's a dry heat. It's still dangerous. But this is going to be a heat where we could have heat index values, over 110. I mean, the Weather Service Tallahassee, let me look at their discussing. So I'm kind of getting this information verbatim here, because this is stuff we're not used to talking about around our area. The Tallahassee office, their weather discussing, was talking about some of the numbers here with the heat index readings that could be measured here based on the different factors. They're talking about excessive heat warnings possible. That means a heat index of 113 plus, heat advisory 108 plus, and there's a situation here, as we're tracking things here, that heat index could just be getting maybe upwards of 119 is what they're saying. The Weather Service in Tallahassee. 113 plus is excessive heat warning, which I believe is an extreme heat warning. It actually still have it as excessive here in their terminology, but it would actually be an extreme heat warning now, because they've changed the nomenclature on this, I believe. Just double checking everything here. Yes, extreme heat warning now. I know they kind of, it's not something I had remembered until tonight. Quite honestly, looking up all this stuff, I see Tallahassee, they haven't, this hadn't been something they've issued yet, but it'll be an extreme heat warning. As we look here, we're going to have a near record high pressure scenario here. The strong ridge, overhead, and that's going to be, really building the temperatures up. Some sea breeze storms still possible, but this seems like, in their words, a slam dunk Tallahassee office for at least multiple days of heat advisory conditions, with some areas of excessive heat warnings possible. And again, I would say likely, and that acts like the extreme heat warning is the new terminology. I know it's something, we're all getting used to. I mean, it's not something I kind of forgot that they changed that. Honestly, because extreme heat, excessive heat is interchangeable, but now, instead of excessive, it's extreme. That's the new wording for this year. But the thing is, it's not just about, well, we're barely meeting the criteria, like we've had in the past year, to excessive or extreme or whatever. It's a situation here where we're exceeding it by maybe five or so degrees in terms of that heat index. That's not good. This could be very dangerous here, as we're tracking things. I mean, you gotta be really careful as we're looking. I mean, we'll be wanting the storms to cool things off. I mean, there'll be moisture, but if you get a heavy storm for a little while, you're gonna cool way off still, even if in a heat wave. But a lot of us won't get the storms. You see only 20% chance on Sunday. It starts to increase on Monday, but areas that don't get the storms, I mean, they could even get beyond 101 there, a few spots. But if you start getting storms, they could be, rather strong with that type of energy around. So that's something to kind of bear in mind. If areas that do get the storm acts, and we start to get more Tuesday, Wednesday. But, this could be a situation with some of the highest local heat index values in years. I mean, but, I know you see 94 Friday, that's still dangerous. Don't get me wrong. That's, what we've seen a lot of this summer, give or take. 97 Saturday started to up the ante a little less rain, but then still a little bit of moisture around, for some of that, and a lot of moisture in the air, though. The humidity. You see 100 on Sunday, but 75 for the low, 76 for the low on Monday. That's very unusually high lows, but that's not the story. That's only a few degree difference. I mean, I don't want to, it's a situation here when we're talking about the heat. Sometimes it seems like we're hyping it up. I don't want to hype it up just to hype it up here. But these are numbers that are so rare for our area that, this is just going to be a order of magnitude thing with the air conditioners. More and more folks, running them even stronger. And we just got to, hope, it's a situation here that, that those air conditioners are, going to stay in working order here, because there's going to be a lot of calls probably to the air conditioning places on that Monday, on that Tuesday next week, because of air conditioners just giving out here because of this kind of heat. So we really need to be on guard here as we're looking again some of the highest local heat index values in years possible Sunday and Monday. I know we've had hot weather, but this is another, multiple degrees above that. The heat index values, I know, these are just very significant as we're looking here, as we're tracking. Again, I don't know if I've ever, maybe I have once or twice, explicitly forecast 100 or so on a graphic, but I don't know if I've ever done it 2 days in a row. And the thing about this is, too, sometimes we'll get it toward Tallahassee at the 100, but not Jacksonville. That's part of this, too, here. This time it's looking like Jacksonville, Gainesville, and Stark. We're right in Stark. Maybe if it was just Tallahassee getting to 100 and Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville, it looks like 97 or 96 or something. We don't go with 100 in the graphic. It's looking like 100 for Stark. I mean, maybe even 101 for Stark here. That's unusual. That's an unusual pattern, quite honestly. I mean, there's a chance that some areas in South Georgia could actually get closer with the air temperature not even factoring in the heat index, to 103, 104 maybe in towards South Georgia. That's not off the table here in this type of pattern based on some of the model guidance. I mean, the model guidance, GFS, I know it always kind of retaught in these situations here with the numbers that forecast. So this is why we can't just go with the model and just show it on the air explicitly. But it's wanting to get us in Jacksonville to 107 on Monday. Now, I don't want to go, with the air temperature. That's too hot. That's not going to happen, I don't think. It always reaches a little hot in these scenarios, but the pattern just sets up right over here. I mean, that's 109 with the air temperature around Folkestone. So, let's just say 101 in Jacksonville, though. That could be 103 in Folkestone, is my point here, as we're looking at things around the Okefenokee Swamp area, give or take. So, we got to be kind of careful as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things, and then you have to think about the heat index, all the humidity. Not a good situation here. All that moisture in the air as we're looking, as we're tracking things. So again, very important to keep in mind as we're looking, as we're tracking things. Because, all that moisture in the air combining. It's not going to be just, I'm looking at the heat index, values. And some of this, I mean, the humidity is not going to be quite as bad as it could be because we're not going to have quite as many storms. I mean, that's the limiting factor. But this isn't like 2019. We didn't have hardly any moisture at all. It was a dry heat pretty much. This is different. And we got to take that into consideration here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. Drinking plenty of water and the like here. Very, very, very important as we're looking at the scenario. You'll be wanting a breeze on that. Let's say Sunday, that breeze there. We might have 5 miles an hour here or there, but it's a situation where we're going to be in a spot here. I know Weather Service explicitly has on that Monday 114 heat index there toward the Stark area on that Monday in that forecast. I will say, and this is the air temperatures because of more moisture. Tuesday could end up being a day that gets escalated based on what they have in their forecast. The heat index value is pretty similar for Tuesday, even though the actual air temperature be lower, the humidity be higher. So that could be something to watch. Now we could, Tuesday could end up, even though it's 4 degrees lower, there could be so much moisture around that could still be a problem as well. This could turn in from 2 days to 3 to maybe even 4, alert type periods per se, as we're tracking things. So you got to bear that in mind, obviously, as we're monitoring the situation. I know the Charleston, South Carolina office already sent out a special statement about the dangers for South Carolina's low country and southeast Georgia this weekend and much of next week, as they're talking about conditions that are becoming increasingly favorable for a heat wave to impact much of the region this weekend and continue much of next week, as a heat dome there of high pressure builds over the southeast United States, as dangerously hot and humid conditions are expected with heat index values there, they're talking about up that way, maybe up to 118 degrees Sunday through Wednesday. So we'll see, because that's the thing. You see more moisture too on Tuesday, Wednesday, but the air temperature is lower, but it could be high enough with that level of moisture that we start to really, this could jump to 4 days instead of 2 days here, because even though the triple digits might be gone from the air temperature, the heat index here could become, actually, something where the numbers are almost the same, because there's so much, that humidity around, even if it's 4 degrees cooler in the thermometer. So, I mean, you do the calculation when you do the formula with that. So, as expected, they're saying to be long duration situation with little relief at night. Is what they're talking about. Extreme heat watches and extreme heat warning are likely to be issued. That's what they're saying in the Savannah, Charleston area. That is what the service saying. Now is the time to prepare for a long duration heat wave. Ensure you have plenty of fluids to drink and have a cool place to stay. Check in with your neighbors, friends, and the elderly, and to ensure they are also prepared for this upcoming heat wave. And this is a developing situation, and you need to stay tuned. Here I know I'm adding this in, but stay tuned to us, obviously, but also know all the radio, and then just all those reputable local weather sources here, news sources here for the latest information as we're tracking things, with what we're talking about, what the weather service is talking about, just kind of ad-libbing, but you kind of get the idea here as we're tracking. This is something we really got to be careful with, because we don't generally see this around here. We already see hot weather in summer, sure, and it's not, sitting in the Midwest where, sometimes it becomes more, anomalous here. We're talking about a situation where it's always kind of hot in the summer, or really hot, but this time it could be extreme heat. We're talking about, 100, 101, and honestly, that, 2-day period there, I looked at a bunch of numbers before I came on. Honestly, read a few more things. I'm getting a little more concerned. The heat index values there, could really still be almost the same on Tuesday, even if we're about 4 degrees cooler, because the humidity is going to be on the increase here. I know the average only about 91. That's still bad. Don't get me wrong. It said, like another part of the country, they don't average maybe 80 something. They have 100. But, 10 degrees above average this time of year is pretty significant. As we're looking here, we had all that winter weather in January. Some of the, more bizarre winter weather you ever see there toward the western Florida Panhandle with a half-foot or more snow, southwest Georgia, Albany area, and the like. And now we're talking about a contrast around 6 months later, an extreme contrast here, where instead of extreme cold, we could be talking about extreme heat, extreme danger here. So you got to be really careful. Again, that 2-day period I have highlighted there, again, with the humidity combined in there, Tuesday could be a day where we have excessive heat. I'm doing the same thing as some folks. The new terminology is extreme heat warning. It could be a day we have an extreme heat warning for Tuesday as well, even if the air temperature is lower, because the humidity is so high. So that's pretty high temperature to have with that higher rain chance. And then Wednesday, we'll see if it lingered into Wednesday, but Tuesday could be a third day here of some real danger. It could feel as bad as Sunday and Monday, as we're looking at things, even if the air temperature is a little lower, the heat index, still a little, we're kind of getting past, 4 days, so a little bit longer, and that things can still change if we get too many storms. That's the thing, too. If we get so many storms to develop in that more favorable environment Tuesday, then it's not going to get as hot, and you're not going to reach those. So it's a little more confidence in these, dangerous heat conditions Sunday and Monday, with the air temperature getting hot and having some humidity, but having more humidity Tuesday. But if you have too much and you get too many storms to form, the actual air temperature won't get quite as high, and the heat index in coordination will be quite as high. So I know it's a lot to go over. It's hot. I mean, that's a way to just break it down and just a really short, hand way. It's going to be hot. It's going to be dangerously hot, unusually hot. It's not, something where, I mean, if you just stand the air conditioning and everything works out, then it's not going to be that big of a deal, sure. But it's a situation here where these air conditioners, this is something, this heat wave, more of them are starting to break down potentially. We could start to have problems here. And some of this starting off on the weekend, this could be where the air conditioning folks are working as hard as they've ever had to work, in our area here in years. So we really need to be prepared for that. Sunday and Monday, we're really concerned. We're in alert mode. This isn't a hurricane coming. This isn't a snowstorm coming. This isn't a tornado outbreak coming. Don't get me wrong. It's a different kind of alert. It's, unlike a hurricane or a tornado, if you're in your home with those, you may not be safe. Now, in this situation, if you have the right equipment and the power grid, and the air conditioning holds up, it should be all right. Not a problem. You're just kind of saying, okay, it's hot outside. I'm inside. I'm okay. But, this is something where if you're outside, you gotta be wearing those light colored clothes, especially if they're more vulnerable, loose fitting clothes, and limit your time, limit your exposure outdoors, at least the best you can. I know it can be hard sometimes, but it's a little bit of an uptick, a little bit of something, this is about as high as it gets. You say other days, maybe not as high as it gets, but this is about as bad as it gets here as you're looking towards Sunday and toward Monday. I mean, as we're tracking the situation here, as we're monitoring things, it's very important to kind of just keep in mind. So I'm just going to check some things here real quick as we're on the air with you guys talking about the situation. I know you don't get 101 in Jacksonville very often. I know last time they got to 101 in Jacksonville, the air temperature, July 28, 2016. Before that, I know they had that there July 30th, 2010. That was after some, I believe, wintry weather. Well, actually, before some wintry weather later in the season. Might have been after some too, but kind of interesting contrast there. But it doesn't happen that often. So 2016 and 2010, and that 2010 it happened more than once. But in Jacksonville, the last time they got to 101 or greater, July 28, 2016. The air temperature, and then before that, July 30th, 2010. So it doesn't happen all that much. Before 2010, you have to go back to 2000, 99, and 98. There were some different, multiple events in those 3 years. So before that, you have to go back to 1987. So if you go to 101, you're talking about something that doesn't happen very often in toward Jacksonville. That's the actual center. But yeah, 2016, the last time. Before that, 2010. Happened more than once that year, and then before that, 2000. So not something you see maybe about once a decade here, based on just thinking about that, give or take on average. So again, something to kind of be talking about there in that regard. So just kind of interesting to look at. I know in Gainesville there, let me look at their sensor real quick. I know the last time they had that there was back in 2019. So again, that's kind of a storyline there as we're looking. The last time they got to 101 or greater was 2019 in Gainesville. Before that, it was 2011. And then 1998 after those wildfires that we had. So sometimes, one of these years it was more than once. But you get the idea. That's just, something about once a decade we're averaging, give or take. And before 1998, it was 1985. So this doesn't happen that often here, 101 degrees. That's 101 or more. And then if, let's say Gainesville, we'll put, some of these, we don't have the full record, but let's say it gets to 102 in Gainesville. When was the last time we got 102 in Gainesville there? 2019 as well. Before that, 2011. And before that, 1985. Let's take Jacksonville. Let's say, get to 102 there now with the rivers. And I know this the airport's further up, but closer to the coast, they may have a little trouble getting there with the heat index. That's not going to be factored into this record, but last time they got to 102 in Jacksonville was 2010. Before that, it was 2000. So, again, something that, again, we don't deal with that much. If you're prepared, this is something to stress out about. And, and sometimes meteorological facts is a little more, serious sounding here. In terms of the facts, and again, it's just a few degrees warmer than what you've dealt with. If you take the proper precautions, you'll probably be okay, but heat can be and has been known, we've seen it in the country before, to be deadly. So we got to be really careful with it as we're tracking the situation, as we're monitoring things very, very carefully here in toward the weather center. So just kind of look at some of this climate data here. Let me see what I can find. It looks like, and I don't have the full data anymore, but Waycross used to keep track in 2012, but they don't keep track anymore, so I don't think I can use that. I just can't go over too many of these because some of these don't have the full data set, so we're kind of missing stuff. But Tallahassee gets this a little more often. Let's see. I'm going to use them here as an example. I'm querying some stuff behind the scenes in the Weather Service database right now as we're on the air with this. I know it's really late. We're wrapping up here soon. We have some storms toward McCulloch County, non-severe, but still pretty nasty. A little bit of lightning and some of those gusty winds there. Definitely a storyline. So. Okay, last time I got to 101 in Tallahassee. We talked about how a little more rare to the east. In Tallahassee was just last year we got to 101, not this year. But last year they had in 23 and 22. Before that it was 19. Before that 14, 2014, then 2011. Now let's say they get to 102 in Tallahassee on Monday or maybe Sunday, but Monday be more likely. Now 102, a little more rare. 2023 we had more than once in 2022, and then before that was 2011. So a little more often, more than once a decade, generally there. But here around Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville, it's more like once a decade type of heat based on the numerical values that we're talking about right now. So that's kind of the storyline as we're tracking things. They're just trying to put things in perspective here with the data and the data points. So just be careful. Probably all right if you're taking the proper precautions. This isn't a hurricane. This isn't a tornado. If you're in your home and you have the air conditioning running and everything, works properly with that, you should be fine. But, it's something we still got to take into account here. So that's why we're in alert mode as we look ahead. I think we pretty much covered everything we need to on that. Maybe, a little bit more in depth than you really needed in some ways, but we just wanted to kind of cover it here the best we could, as we're tracking things. So just be prepared for that heat coming on up here. It's a silent killer, sadly, a sad way to have to put it. As we're looking, you see some rain here at 2:46 in the morning. McCulloch, Franklin, Liberty counties. Don't really see too much of the electrical energy on here right now. There's a little, to look at another product, I have some gust there. Like Dog Island had 39 miles an hour this hour, and last area 55 toward areas there along the Gulf Coast as well. We'll be watching, gotta remember whenever thunderbirds go indoors as well. We do have that lightning around, but the heat safety becomes the top headline, especially Sunday, Monday, maybe even lingering to Tuesday with the heat index values being a little bit, more, elevated, about the same as Sunday, Monday, but because the humidity is higher, even the air temperature is a few degrees lower, then that could be a bigger factor here. So, gotta pay attention to that. We're gonna wrap it for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for trusting me. We're in alert mode. Have a great night. I'll be back here as conditions warrant in the days ahead. So stay safe, everybody.